Welcome to The Wealthy Healthy, the podcast and blog dedicated to inspiring better mental, physical, and financial health. I am your host, Ricky Newton, and today's Financial Fridays episode is going to be an exploration of the very common instance of increases in income, increases in general wealth, or increases in job title leading people to inflating their lifestyles, which is essentially the worst thing you can do for your actual financial health, status, and realized wealth. Survey after survey after survey reveals an interesting and pretty harrowing trend in American culture. Despite being a wealthy, developed country that many call, for good reason in many cases, the land of opportunity, most Americans are in a financial situation in which they have sparse or absolutely no savings to their names. To give you a few of the most recent figures, a Google consumer survey for GoBankingRates.com found that 62% of Americans have less than $1,000 in a savings account, and 21% have no savings account at all. Now, that's a little bit of possible semantics there. There's probably a lot of people who have money, but they're not really keeping them in what would be strictly called a savings account. I know I myself have a couple of different accounts, but keep very little of my net worth in a traditional savings account. But with that having been said, many other surveys still point to similar results when assessing other criteria of savings and financial health. A 2015 survey by Bankrate.com found that 62% again of Americans have nothing saved that they can access in the event of a $1,000 emergency room visit. Ignoring the unusual coincidence that both surveys came to 62%, this is more of an affirmation to me that the savings account wording might only explain away a small fraction of the actual results, certainly not enough to mar that original finding. In an emergency situation, 28% of Americans surveyed in that Bankrate study suggested that they would turn to family and friends for a loan or knowingly place themselves in credit card debt, which in itself is another story for another day for sure, no doubt. But again, maybe this is an issue of liquid savings and savings accounts and checking accounts. Perhaps Americans are keeping piles of money in accounts that aren't as easily accessed for emergencies, like 401ks and Roth IRAs and 403bs and so on. Well, a 2016 report by the Economic Policy Institute suggests that nearly half of American families have no retirement savings at all. That's pretty rough, so let's find some actual dollar amounts. The EPI also reported that the mean, so the average amount saved for retirement purposes by American families is a little under $96,000. So that sounds pretty good, compared to the previous figures. But of course, we all know how averages work. If you take 10 families and 9 have literally nothing saved and the 10th has $10 million saved, your average is $1 million. So not always that informative to look at the mean. The median would actually be more informative. That tells us a pretty similar story to what we've been discussing so far. The median, or the middle amount for all families in the U.S. in retirement accounts is $5,000. So from ages 56 to 61, that amount, including retirement savings, including total savings, is about $17,000. On episode 2 of the show, I went a little more in-depth on the math behind financial independence, the level of accumulated wealth necessary to support your lifestyle expenses without work. So if you're wondering what retirement savings should look like, refer to episode 2 for that little breakdown in terms of the easy math behind retirement. The reason I bring up all of those harrowing numbers and facts and figures is that there's a really simple explanation for why so many Americans are literally a single paycheck away from credit card debt, let alone in such poor conditions and positions to actually retire to any kind of comfortable level. Now, of course, there's a ton of potential explanations and sources of money problems, so let me knock out some of these objections right now. Yes, coming from a poor family or growing up in a low-income or crime-ridden area, experiencing medical emergencies, theft, accidents, legal trouble, divorce, these are all things that can have a damaging effect on financial health, no doubt. But my guess is that these factors alone can only really explain a minority of cases in terms of financial hardship across all American families. So enter the concept of lifestyle creep or lifestyle inflation. From a 2013 study by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average American's income before taxes is about $64,000, while the average annual expenditure is $51,000. In fact, comparing that to the BLS study from a couple years prior, the average income was nearly identical, but spending was about $1,400 less on average in 2011 compared to 2013. So what does that mean? That means that the average American isn't actually earning anymore. And keep in mind, we're not even talking about inflation as well. They're not earning a dollar more, really, but they're spending a little bit more. And keep in mind, too, that the average salary is before tax, and the expenses are, of course, after taxes, which means that for any income tax rate above 20%, the average American actually needs to take on debt to support their lifestyle. So where's that money actually going? Of course, unsurprisingly, they found that a majority goes to housing, transportation, and the insurance that's associated with each of those. In 2013, the average American spent about $1,429 a month on housing. The typical rent cost in 2016 across the entire country is around $1,200 depending on size. So this means that if we're just standardizing these expenses, a typical American is spending about $200 more per month than they should on their living arrangement. Of course, mortgages can cost more than rent, but this is kind of exactly the point, right? The first big area where Americans inflate their lifestyle is housing. Upgrading to bigger houses and better neighborhoods is accepted as the commonplace American dream, what you're supposed to do type of lifestyle. Now, the next area is transportation, an average of $9,000 a year or $750 a month. There was a 21.1% increase in spending on vehicle purchases from 2014 to 2015 alone. Americans spend an average of $33,560 on a car. $33,560 for a car. I can really honestly, I can understand an expenditure if you're a car person and you've got a really high income and you're purchasing your only car. Or maybe you need a larger truck for family needs, like you've got triplets, so you need a bigger truck. Okay, sure. Or maybe your occupation requires it. But look, maybe you could be purchasing a great used vehicle as an alternative, right? A quick Google search turns up tons of 2006 Ford F-150s under 100K miles and under $10,000. Similar GMC pickup trucks are around the same price. These cars are generally notoriously able, with proper care, to last an insane number of miles before requiring replacement. I mean, you can find these trucks that have 300, 400,000 miles on them and they're still running and people will still buy them. So here's something interesting, right? The average American also is only spending $1,315 a year on education. This is the single smallest expenditure analyzed by the BLS. Do a Google search for the BLS Consumer Expenditure Reports and take a look for yourself. More than double that is spent on entertainment, more than double on eating out, triple on new vehicle purchases, 50% more on apparel and services alone. Now, these education costs typically refer to student loans and their associated interest and late charges. So while this is kind of devil's advocate on my part, as I wish education were free or at least more easily accessible for more people in the US, it's really interesting to consider where Americans are placing their priorities. So assess your own situation. Are you living within your means, enough that you're able to sock a little bit away for savings? Look at your house or your rent or your car. Those are generally going to be your big expenses. Of course, taking a look at the small expenses is really important too, as it's pretty clear that Americans are likely spending too much on material goods and eating out as well. I don't necessarily advocate personally for major decreases in entertainment spending, as long as it's within good reason, as I think these kinds of expenses they actually have a net positive effect on enjoyment of life, and there's a lot of mental health benefits that come with it. So outside of keeping a roof over your head and food on the table, one of the better things that money can buy is great experiences. So whether that's a small trip or a concert to see your favorite band, or to spend a little bit on a hobby that brings you a lot of joy, I think those things are very valuable places to spend your money. Now, what's the key to avoiding this lifestyle creep? There are a few really simple strategies that I think most people can start right now. nearly regardless of what their current financial situation looks like. So even if you already have a luxury car and a mortgage that's stressful to keep up with, some of these basic adjustments can probably help. So first things first, and that is to pay yourself first. Do this however you need to, but the best way to go about this is to automate it. So an easy example, of course, is like an automatic contribution to your employer 401k with each paycheck. Most providers make this pretty straightforward to do, and you can change it up or down as you need. But by setting this up in the first place, you guarantee that you can't be tempted by the money, as it's going to feel like it's money that you never had in the first place. You can just create this environment of relative scarcity, and you can learn to live on that. So if you can just commit 10 or 15% of each paycheck in this manner, you will find ways to cut back in other areas of your life to make that portion of your paycheck that you do receive cover your expenses pretty effectively. If you're comfortable at that level, increase your savings rate until you're pretty close to stretching. Obviously, of course, the higher you can get your savings rate while still enjoying your life to a reasonable extent, the better. Check out episode 2, financial independence math behind it. But suffice to say, again, summarizing all of that, the rate at which you save is what influences how soon, or if ever at all, you will be able to retire or at least have the freedom to choose anything that you like as a career prior to that. Now, if you can't survive on 85 to 90% of your post-tax paycheck, and you've made an earnest effort to decrease your unnecessary spending, then odds are, a little bit of tough love here, but you should be focused on increasing your salary. People often ask, where should I invest my money? But look, if you've got a really low salary, the best place to invest your money is in you, in yourself, dedicating time and money as needed to improve your skill set, which, that is what's going to make you more employable. This might come in the form of taking classes at night to start to chip away at a degree. I've got a friend who's in his last classes in January. He's going to be graduating. He's a little bit older than maybe a typical person finishing a degree, but he's going to finish that degree and he's going to hop into a much higher status position that he's going to enjoy more and he's going to be paid more to do. Maybe you start taking independent study programs, online education, just reading your own books and self-educating. There's a lot of different ways to go about this. Even if you have a degree and you earn a good income, you should be spending some time and money on keeping up in your space, or ideally getting ahead. Your ongoing education will help you maintain your ability to continue earning that high income, or if you're kind of on the cusp there, to begin earning one. Of course, these things don't happen overnight, but getting started now is going to get you to that finish line a lot faster than you probably actually realize. So that's the first big change. Now, the second easy change to make is to break down your expenses. Really spend an hour or two with your credit statements and identify areas where you're spending on things that you don't need. I'm not saying cut out all of these things, just identify those areas. If you're able to afford those extra expenses and they actually bring you more happiness and enjoyment than material upgrades, then definitely keep them around. But just knowing where your money is going can help you cut down spending if you decide that, look, this is low priority and this is kind of optional spending, right? So if it comes to the point where you need to be able to break down your expenditures and to cut back on that spending, you're already going to know, you're already going to have an idea of where your extra spending is going. So for example, for me, I have a Spotify membership and an Xbox Live membership, a gym membership it's not the cheapest one that I could find. I've got a 6 gigabyte data plan, which I upgraded from a 3 gigabyte data plan. So these are obvious expenses that they bring me some entertainment, they bring me health, they bring me some comfort, and oftentimes on a daily basis. So I personally choose to keep them around because they're not causing me to miss my more important priorities like paying rent and paying insurance and keeping food on the table. But the key is, if tomorrow my company decides we don't need you doing your job anymore and I come home unemployed, I would know right off the bat. That would be one of the first things I could do, is just go in there and cut back on those things to make it easier for me while I'm overcoming this new obstacle. So be sure to at least analyze your expenses. That's the second tactic. Now, the third tactic is to set budgets. There are great tools out there like youneedabudget.com, often referred to as YNAB. And the Mint app as well. That's one that I personally use. That can help you set and track your progress against these budgets as well. Some actually prefer to do this manually via spreadsheets, which is an option as well. Just pick whatever suits you. Again, I personally track my accounts in Mint, but I've heard great things about You Need a Budget for those who require a little bit more discipline and structure to how they assign budgets to different spending categories each month. Another thing that was, I believe, made really popular by Dave Ramsey is to turn all of your spending into paper spending. So no longer using a credit card. I mean, you could still have one, but actually making all of your purchases with physical money. If you are somebody who has a little bit of trouble with the discipline on credit card spending, that's another great adjustment that goes right in line with setting budgets for yourself each month. The last tactic to employ to help prevent lifestyle inflation easily is to simply know what your expenses look like and never making huge increases to that no matter what. Even when you get a raise, even when you get a promotion, if your annual expenses right now are $35,000 a year, and you join a new company, and this increases your post-tax income from $40,000 to $55,000 a year, but you keep your expenses exactly the same, your savings amount went up from $5,000 to $20,000. But more importantly, this takes your savings rate from 12.5% to 36.4%. So you essentially tripled your savings rate, which in a pretty literal sense triples the speed at which you are able to retire or pay for emergencies, so on and so forth, right? So the rat race, it does a really, really good job of roping people into this way of life. That's why the phrase golden handcuffs and keeping up with the Joneses, that's why those phrases even exist. But just focus on what you are doing. Focus on your goals and your priorities rather than what everyone else around you is doing. Honestly, it's definitely easier said than done, without a doubt, but with a couple of tweaks, you can make it that much easier to avoid. Your future self and your family and your future family will thank you profusely for that. All right, everyone, thanks for tuning in. As always, feel free to share your thoughts, praise, criticism, whatever it is. It all serves to make the show better. And of course, as well, be sure to check out the blog and other content on thewealthyhealthy.co and subscribe to whichever medium you prefer.